Our next panel, we're going to have Miriam Hernandez Cacol. She is going to have a panel, and we're going to be talking about the human element, right? The human side of all of this, about, as it relates to AI. We're going to talk about talent. We're going to talk about culture, organizational redesign in an AR world. And with that, Miriam,
thank you, Liz. Is this on? Can you guys hear me? This doesn't sound like it's on. Hello? Oh, good. Okay. Hello, everyone. I have three great panelists that are going to join me, and we're going to talk about the human side of things, but not just in terms of individuals, but also in terms of organizational design, leadership in the age of AI. Although, just to be perfectly fair, there's a panel later on that's going to focus in on being a leader in an agentic world that will dig deeper into that. But we will touch on that because it's part of organizational design. And then what kind of human capital do we need? What kind of human skills do we need to maintain? And what are the new ones that we need to develop? So let me invite up Jesse Cortez. I'll introduce them when they sit down. Jesse is the Chief Inclusion Officer at McKesson and a longtime friend. He was one of the original high-tech folks who kind of guided me along the way and told me truth from, I guess, reality from, I don't know. You really helped me when I first came to the board. So thank you. I've been speaking Spanish almost nonstop for 5 months now. And it's weird when my trips back and forth to the States, I forget words in English. And then when I'm in Puerto Vallarta and I'm speaking Spanish and someone calls me and starts speaking English when I've been speaking nothing but Spanish all morning, I'm like, how do I say this? So apologies. And then we have with us Lynette Aguilar, who's Vice President of Customer Service at AT&T. Also a lovely woman that I've had the honor to get to know through the high-tech community. And finally, but not least, we have Carlos Beltre, who is the business partner at PayPal. And I can't remember, when we first met, were you at JP Morgan or Bank of America?
JP Morgan.
You had already gone to bank. You had been at Bank of
I have not, no.
Oh, okay. Somehow I thought you followed Rosa from Bank of America to JP Morgan. Okay, all right. Okay, we have to make this kind of fun. It's getting late in the day, right? Okay, so let's sit down and get started. Before we go into the questions that we have for you today, I wanted each of these individuals up here. By the way, Jesse was on the high-tech board. Carlos is on the high-tech board. Jesse was also on the foundation board. And Lynette is a future board member, and I'm just announcing it now. Okay. We're putting that out into the universe and manifesting it. She's probably thinking, I didn't tell you I wanted to do that. Okay. Okay. I want each of you to say one fun thing about yourself. We've been very serious this morning. So say one fun thing about yourself that maybe nobody knows, or maybe lots of people know, but not people in this community. Jesse, something fun, quick.
Yeah, so I used to play minor league ball, double A ball, for a tiny town in Alexandria that actually doesn't exist anymore. But what was really cool was that actually opened the door for me to do Spanish radio, where I would do play-by-play for the Texas Rangers for a short period.
Wow, how cool is that? Lynette.
Tough to follow.
Different direction. I have two daughters. They're both competitive swimmers. They're 14 and 12, and they told me recently, I know too much about swim to not be like a lap swimmer. So I'm going to learn to be a lap swimmer. So, whoa!
Next time we see you, you'll be just a long, skinny lean pole. Or you'll have longer arms. All right, Carlos, how about you?
All right, staying with the sports theme, I love playing golf. Been playing for way too long to have the right handicap. But 2 years ago, May 16, 2024, I had a hole-in-one, par 3, 178 yards, 6 iron, and it's a.
What course? Oh,
That's good.
people think that that's common. My husband is a scratch golfer. I like to brag about him because he won the New Jersey Junior Open when he was in high school. He won the New Jersey Senior Open when he turned 65. He's about to compete in the New Jersey Senior. No, that was the New Jersey Senior Amateur. He's about to compete in the New Jersey Senior Open, which includes golf pros. And he's 76, but he's never had a hole in one.
And
So-
I'm not a scratch golfer.
And see it. So, but that's how hard it is what you accomplished. I'll tell you something fun about myself, and that's that, and no one's going to believe this. I was captain of the girls basketball team in high school. Okay, that'll be that. Because you know what? I was a great defender because I didn't have far to go to the floor to get the balls. Serious, true fact. Okay, let's get started. And the thought I had was to have them each say something human about themselves, because it's important to know that in this rapidly changing revolutionary world we're in of AI, there is still a need for human intervention. And it might not be in all the things you think, but when we were preparing for this panel, we had some really, really good conversations about that. So I'm going to start with Carlos with a question that's basic, but I think it's important. And we've agreed that each of the panelists will try to give examples as they talk about their ideas so they can come to life for you. So Carlos says, AI and agents reshape how we do work. What new roles have you seen that are important, that are emerging, and what new capabilities are you growing within the PayPal team?
Yeah, so this is a great way to start the conversation. I think we all know with the introduction of AI and the disruption, it's not just disrupting the way we work, but the way that we organize as well. So one of the first things that we are anticipating and we're getting ready for is like that historical traditional view that we've had about org design and workforce strategy in regards to like span of controls and layers and autonomous employees. You pretty much can scratch that and reimagine what's going to look like now. And with the advent of our AI, what we're seeing is a number of roles changing, especially the role of the manager. So no longer is the days where a manager will have 4 to 8 direct reports, and it's going to be really blown out where they're going to have a lot more subject matter experts and ICs reporting into them and managers. And then most importantly, they're going to have to know how to manage agents as well. And this is something that we're not even scratching the surface yet. So he has 350 agents running on his phone live right now. Well, think about from a enterprise perspective, what that's going to look like. So we're shifting to how do we get managers now from not just managing employees, but managing agents as well in an effective way.
Well, so let's dig into that one, still you, a little bit. What human characteristics, though, are still going to be important? So you talked about new skills, getting them used to managing agents, et cetera. What human characteristics are still important in that scenario you just described?
Because of the disruption to our employees, and I'm happy that we started with lighthearted, because the truth is that this is a very heavy conversation where we're all feeling it, where our workforce is thinking about the job disruption and the job displacement. So as managers now, having emotional intelligence and having relational intelligence, it's going to be really important. Because you're managing a workforce that is not clear as to what the future is going to be like. Right now, we're all living it, right? Everyone in the industry, not just my organization, but whether it's financial services or healthcare or technology, our employees are like on edge, right? Because they're not sure what's going to happen. So managers and leaders need to be much more empathetic and much more relational, and they're going to have to learn how to really connect with people. And what's happening with AI is that it's making us connect less with people because we're putting difficult conversations into AI. We're taking it. We're seeing people that are just kind of reading verbatim what AI is saying instead of taking that and enhancing your conversation and taking a moment to really connect with people. So that muscle memory that we thought we didn't really need, it's going to be even more critical in the new world order.
You know, I have a follow on, but before I do that, I recently, does anyone ever look at the Edelman Trust Barometer? It's a really important piece of work that Edelman does. And I just recently, I think every 2 years they publish it. And about a month ago, I heard Richard Edelman, who's the CEO of that marketing organization, talk about trust and talk about, and I've heard him speak on this every 2 years. Trust has been dwindling down. It's never been worse in the United States than it is now. And Maria, you heard him with me. We were at the same meeting. And the thing that's really fascinating is that Gen Zers, 73% of Gen Zers no longer trust the businesses that they work for. And the reason why is because they believe that we're lying to them about how many job displacements there's going to be. And the other part of it is early career people believe that their jobs are going to go away. I said 73% of Gen Zers. I think it was 73% overall of all employees, Gen Zers being the largest percentage of that. And it's interesting because when I heard that 2 years ago, when I saw the presentation on the trust barometer, trust in business was at an all-time high, because in the US, it was the only organization, it was the only area that people actually still trusted. They don't trust government. They don't trust religious organizations. They don't trust not-for-profits, interestingly enough. They think that people are just lying right and left. So it's interesting that their acumen or their trust around businesses has also gone down. The trust factor is stronger where it's something directly related to them, their family, their neighborhood, their employer, their boss, not even their employer. So interesting you bring that up. But Jesse, on that note, talk about early career people, which I know from our conversation, but also from my conversations with others, it's a real tough question. What do we do about college hires? Do we do away with them? A lot of work that's done in those first 2-3 years that it's like a training ground. What happens? What are the strategies being thought about?
Well, I think somebody in the audience actually sort of mentioned something right around that effect. Recently, I've actually started to dive probably a little deeper than probably most people have, to really sort of look at not just the impact of what it means from an early career perspective, but actually what that might have sort of the domino effects to an economy, actually beyond that too. I think I shared with you and with our panelists here when we were doing the prep, the words that came to mind was that we use the word revolution a lot around AI. And what kept coming up for me was that it's a revolution. We already know that that's happening, right? But it's a revolution that actually requires, right, a little bit of a revelation. And so the way that really our leaders and our managers need to start to think about this, and really enterprise leaders, right, need to start to think about the skills themselves, is how are we going to actually be a bit of a bridge to be able to actually acquire the skills that we need. There's this sort of dichotomy that exists, right? We have sort of, I'll say sort of experienced folks that are in our organizations today, and there are some that may be a little bit more resistant to adopting the technology at the same rate as maybe others. There's some that are early adopters, just like we do with all technology, right? So we see sort of this pattern, right? This sort of a bell curve, if you will, of the adoption. But what we also see is that earlier generations are going to be much more native in the way that they use it. The challenge is going to be, how do we then sort of allow those skills that they are building just by using the technology along the way, in the way that they think about it, but then infuse, right, relative business acumen that's also needed, right, for each organization. And so that's going to be the challenge, is how do we sort of bridge that? We may end up seeing sort of the rise of externships, for instance, right? To be able to then sort of bring folks in, to be able to do that. How are we going to differentiate the experience so that we're really sort of the sort of top recruiting organizations to go after the top talent? What does that even look like, right? It's going to be very different than the way it looks like today. And so the organizations that can really sort of adopt change and sort of break what the traditional recruiting processes look like, or where we look for talent in typical pipelines, those are the companies that are ultimately going to, be out ahead. And so that may ultimately be the differentiator. But that's to be seen. The economic component of this, and I don't want to like necessarily go down this sort of rabbit hole, but just to kind of give people a sense, we're in healthcare, right? Think about the impact of potential displacement, right, that may exist, different degrees for different roles, whatever it may be. And if they require, right, or they have sort of an anchoring to healthcare sponsored insurance through an employer, we've got sort of compression from a Medicaid perspective. We've got compression in terms of the exchange, right? And then we've got hospitals that are sort of operating a little bit in red, right? And reimbursement rates are going down a bit. You start to see this domino effect, right, of what happens to the healthcare system, what happens to the economy. And then so that's going to be a big question for employers, is how do we then sort of begin to foot the bill a little different way? And that could be also another differentiator in the way that you recruit, right, from a benefits perspective. So there's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot that's still unknown, but it requires really a lot of, sort of concentration to start to actually put these things in place so that you can create sort of the continuity, the business continuity to ensure you have the skills.
Yeah, I love that conversation. I've been in this conversation with some of the other organizations that I am either on their boards or I do work for. And this whole early career thing is kind of like the other side of it is you do have these young people coming in from college or from university or from tech school. It might not necessarily be a 4-year college. And they're so far ahead, as you said, in terms of using, adopting, and being their normal, that they have people going out on weekends on their own laptops creating tools and developing agents to help with the work that they're getting from work. Because there's no one at their companies that are taking the time to say, hey, we need to build an agent around this. And they're creating these and then bringing them back into the workplace and saying, hey, boss, look at what I created over the weekend. It made my job much faster. And companies are saying, wait a minute, how do we, do these belong to us? Do they belong to them? How do we compensate them? How do we have legal responsibility over them? Is it a work for hire? So there's very interesting questions because what does happen with that intellectual property and those agents and those tools that are being created by these kids, not necessarily kids, by these young people who maybe are coming in and not doing that redundant work anymore, but they're creating things that are far ahead of what their own company is able to create. I think it's a fascinating look at what's going to go topsy-turvy, as you started, Carlos, with the way we think about organizations. So with that, I want to move to an area that has spent trillions of dollars. I'm probably exaggerating because it used to be something I did in my past life. And that's the whole area of customer care, customer service, customer first, customer delight. I don't know, everybody calls it something different. There's been so much money spent on creating that perfect process, that perfect tool, that perfect anything. And how do you train these live human agents to work and delight your customers? And Lynette, something you have a little bit of experience with since you head up customer care. How many representatives do you have for AT&T? Like 10,000 or something that you're responsible for?
That's right, 10,000, but that number has gone down dramatically because of AI. So tell us the experience you have in terms of trying to, like, what's happening in the front office with this, what's happening quickly, right? So you'll both talk about adoption and acceleration. So fun fact, from being from a phone company, and adoption for the landline, and that took 75 years for 100 million households to have a landline. AI, right? Smartphones took like 4 years, and AI took 60 years. So that's the pace it's going at. And I don't know it and feel it. But then the reason I say we're not down the last 3 is we use AI to get that perfect experience. nobody in their right mind wants to pick up the phone and call AT&T. Like, I just know that, right? We all have more important things to do. So we've really worked on how AI can help you self-service, or maybe you do call, but there's IER to take care of you, or chat, and that's just better. But we've reduced the number of hours that our customers have to talk to us last year by 16 million. And that reduced the loans.
Yeah.
But here's the fascinating thing to me that we have to have a reckoning with, and just like the next evolution of like optimization, is what you don't see in the scorecard is all the softball calls went away, right? Jesse's not calling me to like, hey, we process the bill and we're chit-chatting about, his radio time. And then I get a complicated call. Like, what's left of all the complicated things, whether it's technically complex or, emotions run high. So maybe it's one of those calls, but people don't get a break. And we've optimized so much that calls just tongue. So the reckoning needs to be, well, what are we going to do with those experts? And do we pull back some on the back-to-back? Because people need to breathe. They talk about emotional intelligence. And I get, so it's great for the customer, but that's been the outcome. We're creating tools all the time to help our experts, right? We're not asking them to go build it or have agents, but hey, why is my bill higher last month than it was the month before? You know what? AI pulls it up. So it's so great. We can shockingly in our IBR, and we have customers that are really salty with our IVR. And we've decided that you cannot abuse AT&T's IVR. Well, he will politely direct you to like a self-service option. And then we'll ask you to call us back later. Like, you don't get to abuse our IVR and then abuse one of our people. So the AI becomes a protector. That at the same time, but it's still at the back-to-back. So it's an interesting optimization. What's the right way to go?
Right on that. We're starting to actually see a little bit more of some studies that are surfacing, and it's around what you just said. Listen, everybody, we already know change fatigue is a real thing, right? And obviously we're at an accelerated pace with changes. It's happening, right? And so people are already dealing with change fatigue. What's new is that we're starting to actually see productivity fatigue. It's exactly what you just said. It's the expectation that you are producing now so much more, and you've got nothing in between, right? It's either you're doing it or you're not doing it because AI is supposed to go help you go do it, right? And this mentality shift that's taking place is actually taking a toll, right? From a well-being perspective, the way that people are feeling about the work, right? And everything's sort of converging. One last thing that I'll share, because I love the analogy about the adoption of the telephone. I think my grandfather was probably an early adopter because his phone number was 36. That was it. It was the 36th phone that was in town. That's why his number was 36. Yeah.
I love that.
I just want to add on that. I think this applies to most positions across corporate as well. The complexity of what employees are going to deal with, where before you had like level 1, level 2 support, and even in engineering, now it's the complexity of the architecture and what's not working and figuring out orchestration, right? So when you're dealing with agents, it's how you're orchestrating all these things. So the level of subject matter expertise has just exponentially gone up, but also the level of stress. So what we're going to have is a workforce that's not just fatigue from productivity and because of this escalation, but also fatigue because now you have to deal with highly critical, stressful situations that you're expected to solve as quick as AI solves. And that's not possible because it takes other elements to get to the bottom line and to do root cause analysis.
Yeah, which is exactly the point that you made earlier, that it's so important to have the human connection, because otherwise that just basically, right, sort of explodes. And so the human connection can help sort of, I'll call it diffuse, right, some of that, and be able to sort of build community within. So leaders that will have an opportunity to really sort of operate with a sense of humility is going to be a bit of a game changer in the cultures that want to preserve sort of the human element.
On our workforce reduce dramatically, to be so mindful of how you do that, like surgically.
Yep.
Because you lose the knowledge management, and we're not looking at it because we don't have the really early college hires.
Mm-hmm.
So the real life knowledge that people have, institutional knowledge that we need, to me, that's such a big risk of this. when we start making decisions quickly.
Well, just one last question before we move into culture and trust, which is what I think you all are teeing up. And of course, leadership skills, which we'll touch on, but we're going to also pump them to our esteemed fellow panelists later in the day. But with AI or agents making so many decisions on, like you described, on all these, sort of the simple to sort of complicated problems that come in to the call center. What happens with this? How do you balance the hard work that human agents are left with? So, and how do you balance intervention when you need human intervention in order to make decisions that are not allotted to the AI agents? And how do you balance that in a way that allows all of the things you all were describing to happen? What's the key to that? Has that been solved yet? It's messy.
Because of age, you're if you start in chat with a bot, it only takes this long. And it's based on knowledge management. Do we have the knowledge management rules right? Have they all fully tested or not? We're not that great. I mean, we're really good, but we're a complex business and invent some of those things.
We're going to get to questions.
Knowledge is built different. And we're so old. Like, I integrated as a newer company. So it's just messy and it's real customer working on real time, but there's not an elegant solution for stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you hold anyone accountable?
Well, I think
We get to how do you hold people accountable if it's so messy, it's so hard? What are going to be the trade-offs in terms of the people managing these agents, whether it's in the customer care arena, in the repair arena, it doesn't matter, right? Banking transaction arena, you name it. I have many frustrating calls into people. So how do you manage the accountability part of that? And how do you build a culture that allows for accountability, responsibility, but also that human element that makes people feel like they're still part of an organization?
I think some of the fundamental pillars that exist in a great culture today, and I'm sure many of you have walked into a company, whether you've been a new hire or maybe you step foot into an organization and you sort of feel this, wow, this feels different, this feels welcoming, this feels like there's some connectedness there. Those pillars don't go away, right? So I think what ends up happening is if we can continue to preserve that there's psychological safety, there's an opportunity, right, to sort of surface something to say, listen, I think this is broken, or hey, I think that there's a better way, right? If we're not able to create an environment where people feel welcome in that and feel like they're connected to the company and its purpose, you're not going to get those things to surface up. And what ends up happening is those ideas will generate, right, innovation. It will generate, process improvement, whatever it is that they're able to do to better connect with the end user, whether it's a patient, whether it's, a customer, whatever it may be. That's going to allow really sort of the culture to really allow people then to feel accountable for the work that they do in an organic way. But if you don't have those foundational elements in place today, it's going to be really difficult to get there.
It's like what Amir and Jesus were talking about. He talked about having bravery, right? Being brave and a different type of brave to be a founder and entrepreneur. I think there's several levels to that. Like at the C-suite, it's going to take bravery for executives and CEOs to say, we're not going to destroy a company for the sake of profits and for the sake of just advancing this. That's one level. Do the C-suite do they have that level of bravery to say no to the shareholders and the investors and say, we're going to do this right? What we're seeing early on is that unfortunately we are trading one thing for the other. And we're willing to sacrifice people for, share prices. And that's a real moment that's coming, right? Like come to Jesus moment. Then another level down is, are we willing to sacrifice the soul of a company? I like to call it the soul. Like what Jesse's saying, when you go somewhere and you feel it, that's the culture. You can't put it into words. So like this is what you feel. And what it's feeling now is that there's soulless. right? It's like the soul has been vacuumed out, gone into the darkness of it. So then it comes to our level as managers and as leaders. How can we preserve our own soul in leading people, in having heart, in having compassion, and building values? And I think that's the level of accountability of like, there are things I can't control, but help me, the things that I can control. And I can control how I deal with people and my teams, in my organizations, and my clients, and my leaders to make sure that I don't lose myself in this period.
So I think I'm sorry, were you going to say something? Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's a fascinating topic, right? But you mentioned leadership and management. I think it's being clear on the difference of those two things, right? If management is straight managing resources, you have an engaging all day long, no different than you do your electricity bill, right? But leading, you can't lose leading's about inspiring people.
Yes.
Right? And if you can inspire people and have the culture and give people a sense of ownership, it works. But the part that's missing is we have to have the debates on what the metrics look like, because we all live in different cultures. And the scorecards that they're built today miss so much of what's going on. There has to be a whole revolution, like you mentioned, in that space too. Doesn't work.
Yeah, I want to get to the trust factor, but we have two people who have raised their hands. So I'm going to take a minute to take two questions. The lady in the blue jacket, and Lorraine, I think you raised your hand in the back. Oh, sorry, I thought you did. So we have one question, then I want to come back to trust, and then we'll go back to questions, okay? I'm sorry, your name?
Araceli Lewis. I'm with Dell Technologies. Thanks for the great information. And as you all were saying, and primarily Lynette, I had an aha moment because I know that maybe in our future, and no one, maybe you've discussed it, Lynette. I don't know if y'all have or not in the boardroom, but I would pay to speak to a human because my time is so limited and I have a global sales team. And if I have to go fix my kid's phone or my phone, whether it's at Apple or even with AT&T, and my daughter works there in procurement, she's just out of college, so love it. But just as you see people paying for medical concierge services for many executives, I think that charging a premium for humanity is where we're headed. So if y'all haven't thought of that, I would definitely pay an extra $5, $15 a month just so I could have that phone line in and bypass it straight to a human. In the past, I used to do that on American Airlines and just say agent, and it would take me to a human. So you knew how to bypass it or zero, but
Zero.
they're smarter than that now. So I just see a future where humanity will be the premium.
Maybe I'm thinking that you just schedule an appointment, just like you would with anybody else. And that's your time, you know, somebody's gonna be there, who has the skill and knows enough about you and what's going on with your product portfolio to be able to answer the question, because the last thing you want in that situation is now I paired you with somebody and can't help.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure we can take control of that you're not the only one who feels that way. So thanks for sharing.
So, oh, you do have a question, Lorraine, or you're teasing me now? Oh, okay. But can I go on a trust question, then I'll come back to you? Because I would like them to speak on this because it's a fascinating topic, is how do you maintain or develop trust again when you have relentless transformation? Because it's not just what we're going through with AI. Like I think back of my career as a consultant, I've been doing transformation projects since the 1990s. We went to ERP, then we went to cloud, then we went to digital. Then we went to all these different customer service, and I'm helping clients with all of this, and people got change fatigue and got exhausted and they lost interest and they made mistakes, and then they would just build their own little yellow stickers to write on the side and not tell people what the problems were in the system, right? So we've got to get to, this is not possible in the age of AI, not possible. Also, as we've talked over and over again, the acceleration is just jaw-dropping. How do we rebuild trust in our people and keep them from jumping out a window because of this relentless change of pace of change? See, that's a Spanish in me, right? I reversed my words. Okay, fast, because Now we have questions. What do you think about that, Jesse?
Yeah, so, McKesson, one thing that amazes me about McKesson, I've been with sort of high, I'll call them high trust organizations in the past. So when we do sort of listening sessions or when we do employee opinion surveys and that sort of thing, they score like in the 60s, 65%. For those of you that know, that's like upper quartile, right? Response rates. McKesson does like 88 to 92% of all of their employees. So it's a very rich sort of response rate that we get. It's because there's a lot of trust. The reason the trust is there, though, is because we actually take action on the feedback. And so you've got to have sort of this trust and action sort of loop, right, to be able to actually go do something about the things that they're telling us. So it is really important to make sure that you've got sort of those listening mechanisms in place so that employees can feel like there's some level of connection and feedback.
But I think the action on the input is so important.
Yeah.
Okay, Lynette.
We have to be more visible. So we're taking our developers to the call centers because it's very different if you listen to a call remotely or after the fact than when you're next to the person in the stress. They know what the answer is, like you feel it differently. So when we make that visible and next to people and then solve the issues on site or make sure we're really clear on closing that loop, we get a lot more trust rather than we just ask for feedback, it goes off into the ether and who knows. But we have just made it more present, more in your face and consistent has been how we're talking.
Sounds like an organizational design thing to think about going forward. Carlos?
Leadership matters. So at PayPal, we have a new CEO, Enrique Lourdes. He just came 3 months ago. And the approach that he's taken is just being honest and having a conversation. And I think a lot of times that just goes a long way to build the trust to say, here's where we are. Here's where we're going. It's going to be painful. It's going to be difficult, but here's where we want to end up. And I think the more we do that, the more trust we will build with our employees. And I think the more time we spend in war rooms, allowing people to kind of just guess what's happening, not have direction, not have clarity, the more distrust we're going to build. So leadership matters.
Yeah, leadership needs to be in the field right now.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is reskilling and upskilling people and retooling them and doing it in a way that's very visible throughout the company is so critical because then they start seeing that you're helping them get ready for the next wave and not just waiting for the day you lay them off. Not that you're not going to lay off people, but I do think reskilling and retooling is really important.
Yeah. I actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I do see, I could see a future. Imagine a future where we've talked about sort of the experienced levels of employees that we have that may not be adopting, right, or leveraging the technology in the way that probably we would like, right, or at the speed or whatever it may be. But then we've got, like we talked about, right, sort of the early career folks that are coming in that don't have the business knowledge. So imagine if we sort of retool or reskill that layer of sort of middle folks to actually now be sort of people coaches or mentors, if you will, that can then sort of apply the lessons from a business standpoint back down to the early career folks to accelerate their business knowledge, even though they're already using sort of so that could be one way, right, that you're not only just skilling sort of early career, but you're actually reskilling sort of leaders that make sense to keep in the organization because they've got the institutional knowledge.
Yeah, so reskilling not only at the entry level, not only at the workforce level, but also at the leadership. And I would argue, since I lead an executive leadership program for KPMG right now, at the most senior ranks. I would argue that. Okay, your question, Lorraine.
That was totally worth the wait. Great question. This one's a little fuzzy, but okay, I was thinking about what Carlos, you said about soul and culture. And I've been reflecting how I think in a lot of our jobs and a lot of our companies right now, our head knows that we're doing the right things, heading in the right directions, but the heart isn't quite there yet. Feels a little bit off, and it's hard to put your finger on why. And then I was listening to Lynette saying all those little exchanges that we had to do with heavily manual work incorporated chit chat and incorporated, lighthearted updates. So I was sort of wondering about that connection as we remove more and more lighthearted, sort of easy work out of the day, does that affect culture? Does that make the culture, the soul feel less present? So my question is, have you put thought into what culture building looks like in a agentic era? What, do the old culture building tactics work anymore, or do you need new ones?
How you implement them, that's what has to change, right? Like, one of our standards has always been, put the customer first, which is for everybody, right? And how that shows up has to change, right? And we have the pace of the customer operating so much faster than the pace of the corporation, right? Because it takes forever to get stuff done, but back to like, when the customer's right in front of you, on the phone or in the store, or you're in their home, like, you need answers. And so to me, those are the things that have to change, and that's where AI can help, right? If we can give the tools so it's fast as the moment, but I think so much of it has to do with the pace of the customer, pace of the corporation on the for every day. And for me, my big hope is that AI helps close that in a meaningful way, then people believe the culture.
Yeah.
Otherwise, all we're doing is turning people out, they're burning out, their well-being's awful, right? HR, like, I mean, it's a big HR nightmare, and you lose all your people. So you can see how you can quickly go down that rabbit hole, rather than, hey, let me listen, what's going on, let me understand, how can we solve the things that are left differently, and how can we, back to like an optimization, when you look at on metrics, can I just give you more time? So you can breathe, but there's a sweet spot, right? Customers don't be on contract. You also don't want to rush them. So if you can kind of figure out what those are, where I can take care of your problem, you're really happy with me as an expert, you feel like you're connected, but I don't waste your time, I take care of your issue, you don't have to call me.
I love the way you framed it though, right? It's the head knows we've got to do something about it. You're waiting for the heart to kind of, right, anchor to the why, the purpose of doing it. The third piece that's missing is the hand, which is the action, right? So once you connect those three things, then now it becomes sort of something that you can embody into the culture.
Jesse, you've become so philosophical in the years since revolution, relevation. Oh, I'm almost one last minute.
Yeah, let me just
I'm
add-
getting like the hook out there.
Oh, we are.
I think where they were going to take Jesus out, I think they're going to drag us out. But I still have one more question that I'm going to ask. So I dare Susanna to drag us out. I think we have 2 minutes according to my watch. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that when the dust settles, because it will, it does every time, employees will remember the companies that mean what they say and say what they mean. And people will vote with their feet. And where there is no soul, no heart, no action, people will then say, I have a choice of where to go. So what we do now matters because people will remember. So I think it's really important. And people will want to work somewhere where they belong. That's, at the end of the day, that's like the human tissue. Like, you want to be somewhere where somebody knows my name. Like, you want to be there. And when this is all said and done, people are going to choose those places versus the other places. And that will mean more than money and shares and stocks and everything else.
Okay, Susanna, I was joking about you. I know we have to finish. So I think that this panel has a lot to say, so I'm sorry we didn't get to more of your questions, but you can see these are 3 practitioners in their art at work who are making this happen. They were chosen for this panel because they're in the middle of this at their 3 respective organizations. I do have one last question that's a quick one for them, which is really going to set up our panel on leadership. As you can tell, we didn't do a lot on leadership skills, although we did. But this question is my closing one, and that's, what's a common wisdom about AI leadership that you believe is actually a dangerous myth in practice? So what is a common wisdom about AI leadership that you believe is actually a dangerous myth in practice? I'll start with you, Carlos. Since I keep starting down there, so I'm going to start to my left.
Dangerous myth. I think a dangerous myth in this world is that we actually won't need people. and we won't need leadership, and that the machine can and will do it all. And that's just a complete fallacy.
Okay, Lynette? Give me one. Give me one.
Up to vision and productivity. Right, that we will be so productive that we do this.
And whether we actually can become that productive. Okay, Jesse.
Yeah, I think it's similar, right? That that machines won't need to be checked.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think that will always be there, which is what the main role that we're going to continue to play.
Mine is that people who believe this is a technology shift as opposed to an organizational redesign. That's, I think, a dangerous myth. And with that, thank you very much. They will be around if you want to ask them questions one-on-one. I think you'll be around. So I apologize that all of you who had burning questions didn't get to them, but as you can see, they had a lot to share. Thank you very much, you three. It was fun.